My name is Phumolang, Simon Lavolo, popularly named by my struggle credential name, Castro, which is having a history, of course, but I'm not going to touch right now. I'm born and bred in George, in Rosemont. A son of Mama Leholo, popularly named, and my father, Ernest Leholo, who passed on, my mother still alive. Started schooling in a small primary school in Rosemont, known as the SCOM, Ebenville Primary School, the time known as the Ebenville Bantu Community School, which is today known as Mateza Primary School, but have shifted from Rosemont to Thembalethu. That is the school at the moment. I've schooled there, and from there I schooled in Somerset East, in the Eastern Cape Midlands. Came back into George again after some time, where I'm going to explain what brought me back to George. In a family of 12, 6 brothers and 6 girls. I'm the 6th one in the middle. 6th one in the middle. Yeah. I'm not married. I'm having 3 kids. It's twins. One is currently, 2 of them are currently in the university. One in New Offs is doing engineering, and the other one is doing law in UJ. And the 3rd one, who's still young, she's in Neisner at a crèche there. Yeah, I'm staying in George, currently in Thembalethu, 1023 Mbengezi Street. That's who I am.
I'm Thamsanqa, nickname Amin, as people know me around in George. I'm born in Rosemont, George. Schooled also at Evansville Primary School. To level 6, I went to Oudtshoorn, where it's called the Pezekile High Secondary School. For 7 and 8, from Pezekile High, I went to Ciskei, because there were no high schools around in the Southern Cape. I went to Zweledinga High in the Ciskei, that is part of Queenstown. I finished there 1984. 84, I came back from Zweledinga to George, back to our place here. My father died 1977. Also brutally killed in the cells of police. My mother died this year, say about April, May. I left with 2 brothers and a sister, whereby they are also working now in their own jobs now. But currently, I'm just sitting at home, doing business jobs and all that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Leholo, can you assist us, because we are here to look about the history of George, maybe in particular to give us the history right from the 80s as to, we believe that there was a lot happening in that time in George.
Yeah, look, when from my perspective, if one have to give a history of George, we need to deal with it in different levels. As much as I'm going to trace it as back as the early, say the late 70s, from 1976 downwards, but that's when my eyes become open, because I was still a young boy at the time, but witnessed quite a number of political activities that were taking place in the Rosemont area, in particular in the school where we were. Of course, our elders, one way or the other, we could share quite a number of issues. But fundamentally, my activism started just immediately after the 1976 uprisings. At a time, being influenced in actual fact by those activities. One fundamental thing that I need to mention, we had this Urbanville Bantu community school that was established in Rosemont, which traces back a long way. There's also a rich history around it. That school was solely meant for black people. That was the only school that was in this vicinity during the time. It starts from sub A up to standard 5. So immediately after you have finished your standard 5, you have to go out of the area and go either to the Transkei or Ciskei or some parts of the Eastern Cape, if you're so fortunate to get that. But it was a very difficult struggle after we finished your standard 5 to go out of George. Most of people ended up working. Those who were lucky, whose parents could manage to board a train for her sons or her daughters to take them to school, it was your lucky to go and attend school outside, because it's train fares to and fro, it's registration fees, it's your boarding fees, all those kinds of things counts in the amount of money that your parents have to pop out in order to go to school. It was very difficult to go to other schools in the surrounding, because if you're not so acquainted with Afrikaans, you won't be able to be taken there. And secondly, it also goes with your surname. If your surname doesn't sound closer to an so-called surname that can be pronounced in an English or an Afrikaans way, you won't be accepted in those schools. So you have just to wait for your turn to come to go to board a train and go outside George. Now, immediately after 1976, there's quite a number of activities that took place in that surrounding that motivated one to get involved on community issues and political issues. The first thing that I think my colleague next to me will also allude into was the question of the forced removals, which were not the first forced removals, of course, of area called Blackisdorp. Blackisdorp is an area which is much closer to the bridge that was once taken away by floods in Rosemont. That a bridge that builds Conville and Rosemont. That area was one area that was it was a mixed area, but majority of people were Xhosa speaking people. It was a mix, not even Xhosa. You find Sotho and some other nationalities there, but predominantly black. When that area was first removed, it has stirred quite a number of things in the area, and it has also propelled us not only to view it as a forced removal, but further as one way of taking black people away from other nationalities. That have motivated us to look at a broader picture, looking at it from a point of view of the system of the time was actually using its force in order to segregate our people. Because when you look at Rosemont at the time, it was more of a interracial kind of a township. But since that time, after the starting of the forced removals of Blackstone, that process, actually stirred anger amongst black people, even young people, because it affected schooling, it affected quite a number of issues. So clearly that have given us a view that should our parents be forcibly removed where they are staying, definitely they are also going to demolish our school. Meaning, by the mere fact that we've got a primary, it will be easy to destroy the primary. Let's rather look at beyond a forced removal element. Let's demand a school. That's where our mobilization started in as far as student politics are concerned. As much as we've registered outside George, but time and again when we come back during our Easter holidays, our June holidays, our September holidays, we are coming here to politicize both our parents and our siblings in order to take that particular struggle forward. And that struggle was actually sharpened by the events that took place in the Eastern Cape, if you can remember, when Matthew Goniwe, in Craddock in particular, there was a correlation between activities of Eastern Cape and that of this particular area. If you can remember, when Matthew Goniwe and them, the system was dealing with them because they were politicizing schools that they were. I can link 3 schools. One, it's the school in Craddock, the high school in Craddock. It's your school in Gravrenet. It's your Utsore, Bogoletu, Ha. These 3 schools have got a common history because the common name of Matthew Goniwe, Fort Kalada, Mhlauli, and the others was linked to these 3 schools, because when they couldn't control them in Craddock, they shifted them to these 3 different schools. In a way, there was a correlation and a connection between these 3 high schools. So I so happened to school in Somerset East, which was a few kilometers from Craddock. And when the first group of students was arrested because they demanded Matthew Goniwe to come back to Craddock, Somerset East High was also affected by that particular thing. Because the Craddock, there was students of around a group of 50 students, but they were cut down into, I think it was 12 students who remained behind bars during that time. They were trialing in Somerset East. So the trial of them was having a rippling effect in terms of politicizing us at the high school in Somerset East, which is known today as Soncishe High. Now those particular activities so happened to spill down to George, because some of us were schooling, like Tami, were schooling in Otsole. That influence, when we come back, we've got an influence from that side. We managed to politicize at this level. And one fundamental thing that united us was to demand, one, a high school for George, and the second element, a proper township, either than Lavaikan, that where we could find a community which is well established with proper amenities, recreational facilities, schools, etc., etc. So that was the nucleus of our struggle at the time of students. Maybe if I can take it further than that, when the situation of Craddock ran spiral, it affected the entire Midlands. We were forced to move back to school, back to our homes, where we belong, because all those schools were closed down. They were shut down by the apartheid system at the time. And our way back home, one clarion call was that we cannot be taken away from school and brought back to these remote areas and just fold our arms. The struggle must continue. And therefore, our coming here was basically to see to it proper high schools are built for black child in this particular part of the country. that was one of the fundamental things that united us. I remember there was a place called Mtonjeni at the old school Ronde in Rosemont. When we started to influence the primary students, in Rosemont at the SCOM, I can mention my younger brother was part of them, Sbongile Krai were part of them. I can mention, the likes of your late Becky Scarp. Those were the people who were in the forefront of demanding a high school. So we were backing them strategically while we were chased away from school. Now, sitting, just folding our arms wouldn't help us. So we rather use them as a vehicle in order to demand a high school. When the first listening session by the Department of Education at the time started, I remember it was Podesta. Podesta called us together with Mama Trin, Mama Bin Kwanyashe, Mama Trin is Bongle Krai's mother, Lucy Jakala, Mama Ngabomi, Branik's mother. All those mothers were brought together in order to talk to us. When we were brought together, we stood in one word that we want a high school for George. Unfortunately, the system at that time was using different tactics in order to dampen your spirit. They took us and opened up an opportunity at Mtonjeni. Mtonjeni was a so-called FET college. The colleges that time were known as Hoodkop. People who doesn't want to go to school just go there in order to have a particular skill in order to go and work. So we had to go there and choose courses. I remember I was doing store management. I was doing store management there, and I was asking myself, why the hell am I going to use this fucking thing? Sorry. I mean, others were doing very funny things. Others, were doing plumbing. Okay, fine. It was good, but how can they take a standard 6 person and let them do those particular skills without, letting him to complete his standard 10? So definitely you are still going to struggle immediately you finish as Mtonjeni. But we use that as our rally field. As we're doing those subjects, strategically we said, let's take what they are giving us, at the very same time sharpening, our field and our theater of struggling for educational amenities for our black community in George. That was the first move that they've tried to dampen our spirit. The second move, they took us from Mtonjeni and put us in Packersdorp. There was an NGO that was run by Lamont at Beach Road. They took us there. Even there, they created something as if we are at a proper school with proper subjects, but limited subjects, of course. But we're not registered with the Department of Education. So it was just a smoke screen to keep us away from so-called trouble, as they were saying during that time. But that one alone have put the level of our struggle at another level. You see? That have made us to keep Podesta accountable for the first time a proper school to be built for a black child in George. And as time goes on, we had to sacrifice. We had to sacrifice. We took the battle to the location. We took the battle to Lavaikam. We mixed the battle with some other issues that affects our people, the element of forced removals, because after the Blackisdorp forced removals, the forced removals of the Rondavels followed, and the forced removals of Lavaikam followed, and that have made things to be worse, because we took the struggle of forced removals, we formed civic associations, we formed student movement, the youth movement started to emerge there, and the clarion call was to say, we are not going to Sankra. That's where the nucleus of the struggle of George started at. And that's where leaders that are currently leaders in our communities, at different facets, of course, started to emerge and groomed at that time.
In line with that, as I was involved in the struggle of those days, 1985, when we started George Youth Congress. At the time I was chairperson of the youth and Castro was the secretary. We engaged other institutions in order to help us in this whole fight with the forced removals. Like the Black Sash, we engaged them, get the news, media, it was some stand, grassroots, and all those people, in order to make it clear that the broader community and the whole country must know that we are what we are busy with. The time was it Grootboom, Grootboom, yeah, and Derek Steelman. They were involved in this when we started fighting this forced removal. And there was a lot of help which we got from Black Sash. Like a lady called Jill Dartmoor, Camel Dartmoor's mother. She was very much active and helpful for us at that time when we fight the forced removals, where they said that we have to move to Tembaletu, and we refused to do so. And 85, it was 85 86 when the uprising started, where the president of the country, P.W. Botha, declared the state of emergency. And it's where they started to take a lot of our comrades who were active in the townships and put them in jail, so that it can be easy for them to remove the elderly people, because what they do, they come and do the elders and tell them, hey, if you don't move now, we'll break down your house. So they were scared. They said, okay, right, we'll move to the place which you say that we have to move. That's why the establishment of Tembaletu started from that time when they captured the leaders of the youth, put them in jail, and they started to do so. So now, we were at that time under Section 54. Others were Section 54, others under Section 29. Now,
Section 50 also Section 50.
Yeah. And by that time, you were not released, you didn't know when are you going to be released. And they keep getting on with this story of taking our people to Tembaletu and all that stuff. So because there are no leaders outside, everybody is in jail, in prison, so nobody's outside. They try to get information out of the prison so that people will know that, okay, we are coming for you, don't move and all that stuff. And it was a range of things, but when we get out, we still came out and fight for our people for the forced removals. And meantime, while we were inside, Black Sash was carrying on, some stand all this, engaging our people, the lawyers and all that stuff, where Colonel Kubas Pina was from Port Elizabeth, helped us with this whole fight of the forced removals, and engaged us with the courts and all that stuff, the people of Cape Town. And meanwhile, in the country, they were also in fights of the same nature of Lavaikam, whereby we used to go out, send delegates out where they gather with the other provinces so that they may know how to fight this battle of this forced removal. And we succeed in it by Lavaikam not to be removed. We also even called the time Alan Busaka and Baba Bishop Tutu, so that Burma must know that we are not moving in. Our people, it's where the people started to know that, hey, we do have backup from outside. And through Samstan, in the south of the Cape and the other part of the province, people started to support us and say that let's support Lavaikan people so that they cannot be moved that side. Can you cross? Now, what also happened the time we were released, some of us were charged with different, they got different charges like arson, assault, and some of them used to be charged and sentenced. I remember there were several guys, I think 3 or 4, they were sentenced to 3 years and sent off to imprisonment. My secretary was also charged and sentenced. You know, that was a sad story where, you know, it took the Bureau at that time to separate us and break that cause of our leadership. So by sentencing part of our leaders, didn't stop us fighting. They were sentenced, put to prison. I remember I put Castro it took him from Oudtshoorn straight to Robben Island. Meaning that people don't get scared and say that, hey, stop this thing, Robben Island, it's a dangerous place and all that. Well, there were some of them who were scared, but we still kept fighting on with that. And Castro came back, he was welcomed there, and the other comrades as well, and we still continue that time to fight for our area. But meaning that when we won the battle of the forced removal, people moved that time to the area of Thembaletu, and it was a level well established then. But we said to those who stayed behind, let's keep it like that and build structures so that struggle may continue. And the others.
So are you saying that at least in Lavai there were like civic structures which were left in Lavai functioning?
Yeah, the civics, can say something?
Remember when the whole battle of forced removal started, it wasn't just a loosely fought battle. It was a well thought, well organized. There was a lot of ideas put and wisdom put into it. Because when we were driving the educational element, we were always saying we can't be driving this battle alone. We need to take our parents on board, we need to politicize them, and we need to buy their sympathy on what we're doing. At the very same time, we structurize them, put them into structures, we always consult with them. To an extent, when we started this whole thing, we established a student movement at the other end. The youth movement emerged as an overarching structure. But we realized along the way that we're being targeted as young people, as troublemakers. Let's rather put the face of our parents on that. So we had a forum that brings all these structures. I remember before we established a civic movement, we had a committee, a parents committee. We call it PRC.
Yes.
We call it a PRC. We call it a parent representative committee. It was a committee of 9 first, and it became a committee of 10. And we said the time is not yet ripe to call it a civic because they are going to be targeted. Up until a point where they are politicized and they are clear, then we can declare it as a civic association with a proper constitution and everything. Because we knew if we are saying it's a civic organization on the same time, they are going to be victimized. So that's how we structurized. We went beyond Lavaikan. We went beyond. While we were saying we're not going to Thembaletu, we're busy politicizing with those people who are in Thembaletu. We're politicizing people in Rosemo. We're moving into the so-called colored areas. Because what was fundamental in this whole forced removals element, it wasn't just a question of just segregating our people. It was beyond segregation. remember, there was this thing called the black local authorities. It was the entrenchment of the black local authorities. Because fundamentally, the side of Timberlake, the other part of N2, was not falling as part of South Africa per se. It was falling under, you choose either Transkei or Ciskei. But there's a committee that is a so-called municipality that governs you, that falls under a black local authorities. And all black local authorities were actually governed in the Eastern Cape. So, meaning in George, you could have had a state within a state. It's your South Africa, in the other side of N2, and the other side, it's your Transkei and Ciskei, which are being governed by the black local authorities. That's one element that makes us to stand fast and fight for that kind of a system that was introduced at the time. Because we were staying in two cities while we were in one city. So if we are lesser than white, you are going to be put next to the N2, and if we are too black, we are going to be thrown that side of the N2, so that we're not closer to town. That's one thing that has made us to fight that particular system. Hence, it has a very broad kind of sympathy throughout the country, even internationally. Because if you can remember, Tammy,
was it a similar situation of Ngobongwane and others in Cape Town to have that CPOA or something?
Yes, it's a similar situation. Because if you can remember, George was not alone in this. It was not alone in this. Remember, there was a survey that was done at some point in time where people have to choose whether they are going to Transkei or Ciskei. There was an effort to physically remove them and drop them to Ciskei because they don't belong here. You know, so if they are coming here, they are going to come here as migrant laborers, you know, and go back to Transkei or Ciskei. But they couldn't reach that level of physically moving them, you know. Remember, at some point in time, they were using, there were police who are falling under these black local authorities that we call Luandara during at the time. They were using certain people. If you have come to George without a pass, you are going to be taken back where you are coming from. So you must have a permission, you know, to come and look for work here. So they were beginning to entrench that kind of a system. But unfortunately, they couldn't. The only way to do it, you know, properly was to create certain townships that are falling under the black local authorities, you know, separately from the George municipality. You know, almost the same that they've done with the Colours. They came with these management committees. Pakasdorp, which was one of the management committee, you know, a system that they used, even in Rosemont. Womsem, Fichland, and them, where the people were Galand, and them, where the people were in that management committee, you know, that was actually governing so-called colored people. So you could see how they were entrenching segregation in George. So we were actually against that particular thing. Maybe to allude more on that, on the question of segregation. Remember, I mean, I'm not sure were you at school at the time or were you all back already. I remember one time when what do you call this party, Hendricks? Labour Party,
yes.
During the time of the tricameral parliament. I remember during that time of the tricameral parliament, our school was shut down during that time. I wasn't at school, I was here. I still remember when they were doing, was it a referendum or what was
yes.
They were voting, you know, something of that nature. Yes. It's when we introduced the UDF element in the area. And that have caused a hell of hatred from the system to our side. Because we're young people coming from school, here we are, you know, these people are going to vote for a referendum and all these kind of things, and we were saying, something else at the other hand, with UDF t-shirts and everything. And that alone have managed the system to earmark all of us and declare us as the enemies of the state. Because most of us, our names were actually registered as such. Because once you are being registered as an enemy of the state, the security system are always on the watch on you 24/7. Your moves, people that you are mixing with socially and otherwise, and all those kinds of things, what activities are you involved in? And therefore you become the dangerous people in a way. So you are declared a terrorist in one way or the other. I think it would be important that we raise that one. Although I'm not sure you're going to go into details.
Yeah. Talking about the referendum story. Yeah, and we managed to stop people, most especially the colored people, to go and vote. I still remember at the corner survey, there were only people who voted, there were about 10 who voted for the Labour Party on this referendum issue. And that was a success for us. And we managed, the high schools were like Parkdean High and George High. And was it Mizama at that time? No, yeah, but it was George High and Parkdean High. And we managed also to get some of the students of Parkersdorp. But and we rallied them and starting to make people aware about this referendum and voting story, to stop it and talk to your parents in order to support us in Lavai, so that it will be an issue of Lavai only and they don't sympathize with us. And when the students engage themselves with us, I still remember there was a cleanup project which was launched by Parkdean High, where you see the black beds and move around in Lavai. That was nice of people, because they said that no, these kind of people are with us. Because the time when we fight against the system that time, they were busy with the hippos and I would say, hey, the couples really worry. By the time the students come and they help us in Lavai, the grannies realize that, hey, we are wrong. Those children also go in there and they help, and nobody is touching them or beating them up. And they started to engage them with us on the whole story. And when they started to come and shoot tear gas and all that, the road will stand up. Corn will stand up. And all areas standing up and say, hey, but now enough is enough. We must support Lavai. I still remember where we got through Brexit. The area called, not in America, that place, mother sister, it was Tacoma. Tacoma, no?
Tacoma.
I think it's Tacoma in America. Sister community who joined Lavai in fighting the post removal. And they helped us a lot, because they put pressure onto the government in South Africa so that they may stop this post removal. I mean, there were, as you have said, international more pressure to the government, to that apartheid government, to stop this whole story. What I still can remember is that those days there were no offices like except Oudtshoorn. Some stand offices on that side. When we need help, we had to get there. And we, as a customer said, we got together and we said, hey, we had to open up. I still remember Kenneth Grootboom. We got advice on, let us open up an advice office in George so that we can be capable to have material and everything here and resources in George. And we open up the advice. That was also a threat for the Boer. Because now, grass and Samson had to get to our office, then we can distribute our pamphlets and whatsoever. They used to came there, the special branch, and come and get our material and say that this is illegal. But at the end of the day, say that but it's not illegal. I think because this information for our people, to make them aware what's going around themselves, more especially the so-called colored people that time. And when we have distributed and they try to confiscate a lot of the material, after the close down of the advice office, we opened it up, the George Resource Center, where we also been funded by outside countries. We used to ask for funds and all that stuff, you know, to get this machine going, you know, because we used to give information to the students and all that. The Castro Tantis, I also used the facility, you know, to get the students there and get information from the funds, take it out, workshops and all that stuff. And that was great, you know.
I've seen in the museum there are some exhibitions about certain leaders within the civic. Do you still remember as to who were the leaders of the civic during the period of the height of the forced removals in Lamai?
Look, we had 3 sets of leadership.
Good.
3 sets of leadership. There's leadership during the time when the whole brainchild of the civic movement started, which I can mention amongst them were Ubabu Nokyeke, may his soul rest in peace, Tato Aseni, who's still alive now, Mamu Aseni, who's still alive, Mamu Lucy, may her soul rest in peace, Umama Kwanyashe, Sispin, may her soul rest in peace, Umamusku Trin, Mamu Krai. That is the first set of leadership, that one. I think the list is endless, because they weren't a group, they weren't a big group. Because we started with a committee of 9, and then we said it's going to be a committee of 10. Then when we started to establish the civic movement, then we started a formidable kind of a structure, which leadership also forms the very same. Mamuno Ngabomi, Mama Katalava, may her soul rest in peace, was the key pin of that particular group. Who else that I can mention? I think that first set becomes the first group of people to be leaders of the civic movement of the time. The ones who were involved in the civic movement, that is Abo Zowijuko and the others, so that you know, is the set of leadership of Ilavaika Civic, which have actually emerged when everybody was arrested. Yes. But the ones who have been driving, you know, the wagon when the situation was red hot, it's that 2 set of leadership, the ones that I've mentioned by names, and most of them have passed on. The other 2 things, while you are talking about that element, there's also, while situation was really at its height, there's also some incidents that happened in both communities, that is your Lavaikam community and your Tembaletu community, and also your so-called colored communities. I remember there was a march of students, which year was that? Where we lost 3 students. We lost 3, it was 1 or 2 students and 2 young people, Sable and them, which I think it's one area that needs to be revisited at some point in time, because they were short. One of them died because he sucked his smoke. Yes. And also in Lavaikam during forced removals, there's also a set of 4 people who died there. It was Uskoma, Mkhotsi, Usiswana. Siswana, just the name of the 4th one. Those ones were killed very brutally. We witnessed some of the others. Mkhotsi was shot in the early hours of the morning. Nkosinathi from Utsure. That 4 died almost in the same. That we used to call that weekend, it was the black we call it the Black Sunday, Black Saturday, something like that. But it was a black weekend, because from Friday the system was very harsh on us. That was the Friday. The Saturday, it's where we lost the others. We discovered the bodies of the others the following day. That is on the Sunday morning. That is the Suswana, who's from Queenstown, and Mkhotsi is from Lavaikam, and Skoma is from Lavaikam. Skoma was dragged into a lake var, while still alive. Sure. While still alive. They drag him and they throw him into the lake var there while they were picking up the corpse of Usiswana near the migrant laborers who were staying at the camp there. What was that camp's name? Near Baghdad.
LTA.
It was LTA in the other one. There were two camps at the other side of the N2. So they were. He was shot that side, and Ulendo, the one from Utsore, Shaz was shot in Borjas. Yeah, in Gasha Street. He was shot there. So that weekend alone, it's one thing that I think somehow that history needs to be shared. It's history that needs to be shared. It's history that needs to be researched properly. And there are people who can bear witness to quite a number of other activities. The retaliation of the community was immense. It was very immense, although it's not mentioned. I know for a fact there's a couple of police who were blacks and quite hard there, And the community started, because of the death of one of the colleagues of the other groups there, they came with innovative ways of fighting against the gun. They were using sling, all these kinds of things. You could see very funny ways of fighting against, while we are not having ammunition, but you could go into a hippo and manage to do whatever you want to do. So it was a weekend that, that one really, it's still like yesterday to some other people's minds. There's also another one when you take your ballots bay in Timberlake, in Sankra, down Sankra Road, the area that is now declared a private area. There's a soul that is roaming there. May his soul rest in peace, Ace Kobe. Ace Kobe was maimed and murdered there at the back of Timberlake, at that beach there. You see? That's one of the histories that people doesn't mention. And to some, it looks as if it's fine and well. And today, that place is declared a non-going zone for black people there. And the soul of that man is still roaming there, And nothing is being done. As much as nothing is being done by these ones who died in Lavaikam, it's just quiet right now. As much as nothing has been done with those who died in near Sanderville, near the bridge in Sanderville, Sable and them. I mean, it's quiet about those people. And those are people who have been murdered, in actual fact, by the system. You see? It's so luckily today the family of Abida Harris is taking Abida Harris matter up. One of the first victims in September in 1976 who was shot brutally by the police. I mean, that history need not just to be left in a vacuum. It's history that needs to be told. It's history that needs to be written and put into books so that sons and daughters of the soil should learn about those things, where we're coming from with George. Lastly, I think there's one part of George that is not really mentioned, here. One area that still have its remnants of racism. It's a beautiful area to stay with. It's a nice area to stay in. But the reality of the matter, and a system of apartheid is still spooking in this town. It's still spooking in this town. And that is one of the things that the current generation need to stand up and begin to change things around. To change things around. George cannot develop within the framework of the old system. because the mentality of the people won't change. Won't change. George was actually not meant for black people. You know? Because history of forced removal doesn't only start with Timberlake alone. In the surrounding of George, it's documented, a history of a stream of people being taken by force to Transkei and all these areas. History of Chris Kamau, for that matter, it's people who were coming from this place, black people who were staying here. You know? The system of the pass system, you know, there was a special pass that you need to get into George in order to get work here. You know, you have tasted this one. Municipality of George wasn't using people from George at some point in time. They go and take people from Middelburg, Colesberg, and all those kind of areas and work there with special permits, of course. You see? Now, that history alone need to be brought into the light. You know?
Hence you find most of people from Middelburg and all these towns in George.
In George, yes, yes. And if you can find out, they don't find this place as their hometown, for that matter. Because some of them are born here. But still that mentality of saying I'm going home to Middelburg, a person always wants just to go home. You know? So it tells you how the apartheid system was manifested into the heads of people here. You see? There's this element of commerce and all those kind of things. It was something that was prevalent during the time, and it's still prevalent even now. I think some of that history, you know, of those kinds of forced removals, you know, needs to be told, you know, because when you go to the land claims, you look at people who are claiming, it doesn't trace back as Lavaikamp only. It doesn't trace back as Rosemont alone. Because part of the Blackisdorp was removal. It didn't end with Blackisdorp alone. Even those who were staying, particularly my family was a victim of that. But I know for a fact, from my side, it was a question because I was already an enemy of the state at the time. So to be in Rosemont, it was very dangerous. So they must just move us out of that area. That was fundamental for them to do that particular thing. Because families that have been forced removed there were targeted. Not everybody was forced removed. Certain black families were particularly those who were against the system.
Because I can notice during your time and families who were in Rosemont, I think very few of your family moved to Sankra.
Yes, very few of them. Yeah. It's only the targeted ones. Yeah. They know their influence. People that they couldn't really touch were like the families of Obo Amin, because at some point in time those families unite and resist that kind of thing. Because they come, municipality first come first as a guise that Amin's family haven't paid the rent for the past 3 months. So then slaughter them, lock your house and everything. So if you can't manage to break that thing, the following morning you find all your family staff is on the road. That's how they manage to deal with quite a number of families, you know, to get them out of Rosemont. So after Blackisdorp, it was the Rosemont group and it was the Ron Devils.
Yeah.
You know? So now that is a trend. It's a trend of forced removals that took place in George. The Skeenskral and the rest, the Blanco ones. When you look there, it was a black child who was being chased away from those particular areas. So you could see that history of forced removals, which is not so much told and put into context today.
Yeah.
So as to give a history of George, where does this element of George come from? By the mere fact even Botha came to stay here, because I believe the whole cabinet of the apartheid system that time, they held their very crucial meetings here. And as that result, this place, Wilderness in particular, and some of your key areas in George, were one of the key areas of the security systems of international countries, for that matter. All their intelligence agencies were staying here.
Clinton and so on.
Yeah, yes. That was a nice spot for them to hide, and a nice spot for them to advise apartheid system. You see? Hence the hand of iron was used against that resistance that happens in Lavaika. They smashed everything because it exposed the town of the president of the time. You see? But we have banned. They are back. We won the Lavaika force removals. We won quite a number of things. Schools were built thereafter as part of our victory. Imizamo yetu followed. Timaletu High followed. So it goes with other primaries that emerges thereafter. But fundamentally, it started with the Ebenville Bantu, a community school.
I remember who was the principal there, Mateza. Who's that principal? Neza. That was
and you know what is so crucial about that school? That school was never a state school. It was a community school. It's communities that came together and clubbed money in order to make that school. After some time, the state pretended as if it's a school that is known, but it was a community initiative. So it tells you, you know, it's a term of reference where the struggle of resistance of this town started, where it comes from, and how have they managed to.
Castro, tell me, what was the role of the teachers in primary at the time?
Look, you've got quite a number of different
Characters.
of characters of people, because system at the time was so strong and so harsh in such a manner that it can declare you vulnerable, even if you are not vulnerable. It declares you vulnerable because it look at you and look at what assets do you have and how can they effectively use you in order to accomplish their goals. Because some of the teachers were used as enemy spies. Some of the teachers were used as enemy spies, particularly those what the Norman Africans, you'll find the young ones were more politically aware as compared to the old ones. The old ones were always used to listen up how the students are thinking and how some of the teachers are actually thinking in terms of conscientizing the students at school and in terms of taking the plight of those students forward, you know, that they are facing at the time in their education system. So they were used in that is why they were divided. It's only after some time where you find the teachers' fraternity become a united force, you know. Because if you can remember, even in their unions, they were divided into two. There was this one that was more lenient to the apartheid system, and there's this one that was more UDF inclined.
Yeah. Because I remember they were, what was their name? Dinosa, what?
What was that?
Naptosa.
Naptosa,
Naptosa, and the other one was that sort of sound.